In conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music and gaming. Only on Hungama Game Changers podcast.
Hi, welcome to Hungama's celebration of the 50 Game Changers 2024. Over this season, you will get to know women who are chalking their own path and paving their way for the multitudes to follow in the field of entertainment across music, video and gaming. I'm Ronak from Hungama, and it is my pleasure to welcome the game changer Raveena Rawal, founder and CEO of Dedan, a media and entertainment company that's your all-access pass to stand up. And Raveena has very quickly become the most trusted voice in comedy. With 20 years of experience in media and entertainment, Raveena is laughing all the way to the front row and on stage with sold-out shows, the Laughing Dead Festival, and stand-up stars sitting down to hear what she has to say. Welcome, Raveena.
Thank you so much, Ronak, for that very generous intro.
It's incredible to actually have this conversation with you because I think comedy really continues to be slightly more of a male-dominated space in entertainment than even compared to others. And it's lovely to see a woman calling the shots there. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to share the knowledge and shorten the learning curve. But tell us about the journey. How do you get here? What inherent traits in Raveena make comedy resonate harder than anything else?
Well, I think it has been a coping mechanism for most of my life, just to deal with the chaos of the world that we live in. You know, throughout my career, I've had the wonderful privilege of working with some very, very talented writers because I come from like an editorial background, and I have worked with Viacom 18 in various capacities. And, you know, one of the things that I had done that, you know, was a pretty big highlight was a youth magazine that, you know, I created from scratch for MTV, who kind of treated it like, okay, you figure it out on your own. You know, when I worked with a lot of kids who were in college at the time because there was no budgets for this. You couldn't hire like established writers and so on. But I wanted to also be able to, you know, capture the pulse of what they're actually saying and thinking. So I was like, you come and write for this magazine. And, you know, they were like, we don't know how to write. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I'll do the writing and the flourishes. You just give me like your stream of consciousness thought, which is exactly what I got. A lot of these people that I had put together, like a network of writers and, you know, artists of various kinds, they kind of grew up and became some of the most popular comedians that we see today, which is, you know, they formed the EIC, they formed the AIB, and a lot of the bigger names that you see in comedy today were part of that. So I've been invested in sort of like their journeys, personally, because I've known them since they were younger. But also, I think through that, Veer Das was once, I mean, I've told the story a bunch of times, but it's honestly the beginnings of it. While in college, Veer Das was also, I think, studying in the States at the time. He had just started hitting up the open mic circuit, putting a show together for himself. And he had done like a sort of like a comedy workshop that I'd signed up for. And through that, we studied the greats of comedy from across the world. And, you know, it was at the time where you still burned CDs and put them into CD, you know, those folders, CD jazz, that's what they call, whatever, I've forgotten. And, you know, he'd bring that entire folder over and we would listen to it. He'd make us take it back, make copies of it, listen to it again, understand, analyze. And suddenly, like, how powerful it was became very, very evident to me. In terms of being able to have conversations in a more direct and more sort of comprehensive way than any other sort of approach, especially when you're talking about the youth. And that's a space that I have worked in, been interested in, passionate about for as long as I have been working. So I think I've kind of held on to that, and then simultaneously to, you know, like I said, to be watching how Indian comedy grows in this urban space that we see it today. Of course, comedy in India has been around for decades and decades longer than, you know, what we are talking about today. But to see this urban stand-up thing take shape where people were there were no rooms for comedy. You had to just, convert a restaurant and stand up on like a chair and say, I'm going to tell jokes. And people were like, why? And so on. But to watch it go from like a nothing, form collectives, and then where we are today, I think for me, that has been so exciting to see the potential of it, and also being able to compare it to what American comedy has done, what comedy across Europe and Australia has been able to sort of do. And in India, you're talking to the largest population, the largest youth population in the world.
Yeah.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So you have the potential to, influence first-time voters and, speed up the process in terms of cultural, thinking about cultural and societal issues that we have, that we need to be talking about constantly. And also it's just a great form of entertainment for somebody who's solo or with friends or with family, with a date, any sort of thing. So I think altogether, I found it to be a very, very exciting dynamic, and that potential for impact is what really got me. And so that's how I got into this.
Okay, so that's how you got in. Yeah, tell me about getting accepted.
I think it was very confusing for a lot of people, but to your earlier question, which was what does it take and what are the qualities of Raveena, it's that you got to be really stubborn. And I think if you're confident, and if you feel confident that you understand humor and the sort of rules and therefore how things can be broken and so on, I think somewhere you bulldoze your way ahead. And I felt like it was so scattered that it was so fragmented, the scene, which is a terrible word to use, but I mean, that is what it is. So it was a very, very exciting part of pop culture. It is a rapidly evolving entertainment option. People were talking about how comedy is booming. And I found that at the same time, it was really fragmented. There wasn't even a place where you could get all your information. There isn't enough infrastructure, but I could see a few industry sort of developments happening. And I think I realized very quickly that while, I had put in the work and earned some stripes in media to break into comedy, that was very, very cliquey at the time that I sort of was looking at this already, was going to be a bit of a challenge if I didn't handle it right. But also, I think it came from the authentic sort of curiosity to understand what are the pain points. Was it from the outside or from, people who I've known for so many years who are big shot comedians today? I mean, it seems like it's super fragmented. What are the pain points? And before I launched Dead Ant, I actually spoke to about 50 different artists and comedy workers, so people who run venues and produce shows and OTT platforms, people who are calling the shots there, to just understand what are the pain points here, and is there any way in which I can create an ecosystem that contributes to, helping solve that. And I think at some point, well, of course, over the years, because I've worked with so many of them in different capacities, and I have that kind of access to, where they can tell me things off the record. I'm not a stranger to them, and so on. I think to have approached it with empathy and with curiosity and in a real, genuine way to be I'll figure out the business aspects of it later, and I'm not here to scam you immediately, because I think they're wary of even being interviewed at that time.
Yes, it is a very, very space. So you are, unless you're an insider, you're very much an outsider.
Correct. And if you're not an insider, you don't get the information or the insights that are required to be able to drive this from a long-term perspective that's sustainable and can be scaled and, so on. So I think one of the most valuable assets that Dead Ant actually managed to establish over the first 1 or 2 years was that mutual understanding and trust, and
Reena,
I think
I'm going to ask you here, you mentioned that, you decided you're going to sort of figure this out, build your relationships, and then, worry about the revenue later. As a journalist, that's a great policy. As a startup founder, that becomes a little bit different, right? How do you feel, how do you balance that role as you, are the head cook and bottle washer of everything Dead Ant, and how are you still standing?
One of the first thoughts that I had when I realized that I wanted to put something like Dead Ant together, which started with the online platform and, the creative studio and stuff. And I realized that, my God, we were going to be the first in India, which immediately terrified me, because I was like, okay, so what am I not seeing? Why am I the first? Why has nobody done this? Because it seems so obvious to me.
Right.
That my first sort of step was to spend about 6 months researching it and making sure that, people weren't not looking at it for something, for a very key reason that I hadn't noticed yet. And when you're starting something, I've always believed that more than anything else, the timing of it is very, very important. You could, have a great idea and you could be the first mover and all of that. But when is it that you're sort of entering a space becomes like very crucial to how you are able to grow. And, so, I mean, there was a very clear business, in this. It was endlessly scalable. It seemed to be able, I mean, in terms of width as well, like the amount of the verticals that it has the potential to sort of open out into, once the sort of foundational flywheel is, feeling solid, it seemed like the most exciting thing. And here you're talking, what is your target audience? It could be, it's anybody, right? How do you reach people through humor? How do you reach people through
like music in that sense? Everybody wants to laugh.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you've got grandparents laughing on WhatsApp jokes, right? You've got little kids, dressing up as your favorite characters. So
Raveena, do you feel like it was harder for you to get accepted because you were a woman? Do you think it was easier because you were able to bring the empathy? Do you feel like it was indifferent and it was just because you were curious and you were genuinely interested in comedy?
I think it's because I'm a trained journalist and editor, and very little phases me anymore. And I think it also gave me a lot of confidence. I've run very, very large teams. I have run, I've handled portfolios that have like 5-6 brands under them. We have won awards for various things that we've done. So there's a certain confidence that comes with saying, I know what I'm doing. And, I have a clear direction in terms of where I want to go. And therefore, how you deal with people along the way, they get used to you more than the other way around. And I think that if you do it right with the right intentions, and, take the time in the beginning at least to, remind people what the larger goal is, I think it sort of, once people trust your intent, it sort of becomes less threatening to them. And on the other side, I think that because I put in the research and I'd, figured it out and worked out all the ways in which this couldn't work, and, is this really going to make an impact and all of that? And then I felt super confident, and I've had great mentors along the way as well. And, so I felt super confident about it, and I think that's what comes with it, and the rest is,
So you mentioned that comedy is really coming of age, and it's some timing has been, on your fair side. Tell us about a project that you're particularly proud of.
Within Dead Ant? Yes. I think we'll cut that out.
Yeah, let's go with Dead Ant.
my science project on the water cycle.
Yes.
No, we'll cut that out. Okay, whoever's editing this, please.
Yes. Okay.
I think the thing that I was very, very proud of is the Laughing Dead Festival that we put together last year. It is events was always something that was part of the plan, but then the whole world went into lockdown, and that pushed and delayed things a bit. But it allowed me to actually study it a little bit more, and I didn't want to get into it. There are a lot of people who've gotten into events. There are a lot of people who have tried to, make comedy work. And if you speak to people around the world, they've never worked with the same promoter twice. You've never seen an IP or an event that has been regular, that you can count on coming back and so on. And I wanted to understand that space, and I took my time with it. And then it was slow and then fast. But so it took my time with it. And then suddenly I was just like, okay, I just want to, it was Dead Ant's 4th birthday. And we wanted to have a big blowout party because it was also a time where people were coming out of the lockdown. People were happy to kind of, go step out and, do things. And I thought this was a wonderful way to do it. And we did it at Mehboob Studio, which I chose because it's iconic to Bombay. It's in the heart of the city. And we were able to create different spaces, and we had like a 2-day festival with lots and lots of shows. We had over 35 of India's most exciting voices in comedy performing. We had an international headliner, Daniel Sloss, and it sold out, and we were able to bring to life a really sort of fun and compelling vision. I feel like we called it Laughing Dead because the idea was that everything is feeling so apocalyptic right now. Yeah. No, and also like, the only people, the world is ending. The world is on fire, and the only people who are surviving are the ones who think that's fucking hilarious. So, come here and die laughing was kind of the idea behind it. And we created zones like that, and we, went all out with design, which is like another sort of, so we made it a really fun place where you could come and hang out for 2 days. So you could step in and there was really enough for you to never want to step out till it was done. So I think actually, and it was at scale. So for Dead Ant, I mean, I've done this, of course, in different ways, but to create something from absolute scratch and not know what's going to happen the day that, for the first show when the doors open, I don't think I will forget what that felt like. So yeah, I think that is definitely...
Talking about sold out and international headliners, does that make you anxious as somebody who's also in the live space, also in the space where you're bringing in international talent?
Look, I think right now it is going to be chaotic for a while because, this is the most exciting sort of space right now because everybody's trying to grab a piece, and, all attention here is only good news for live events, and we'll figure it out as we go. We have a problem with venues. We have a problem with infrastructure. All of those things will slowly have to be sharpened and leveled up and so on. Along the way, of course, there will be things because I think it's all new. It's new to India. Coldplay has played here before, but it's never been, it's also globally correct, right? So, but it didn't have this kind of thing because since Coldplay was here last, social media has blown up and people are not going anymore, for example, to a Coldplay or a Taylor Swift concert just because they're fans of the artist, but because of what it's a community experience. It's a FOMO-inducing, highly wild, Instagrammable sort of experience. It is, there's so many little, so it's about creating those unique experiences. And I think those are people that do it really well. So I think there'll be some acts that are setting the standard, and there'll be some that, are going to come and experiment with it. And I just think India is a really, really exciting new market with so much potential because of the numbers that we have.
Absolutely. And I think also since Coldplay was here last, COVID has happened. And so I think we prioritize experiences over almost everything else.
Absolutely. And community. It's like a pattern and a trend that I've noticed a lot is that people are buying solo tickets as well. Because now you can be confident that, you show up at a music festival, a spoken word festival, or a comedy gig or whatever, you'll find other people like you who are bonded together by this. And I think the isolation of COVID has resulted in this need to reconnect. It's also, I've also noticed digitally we're all talking about, detoxing and, reducing that and going back into the world. And there's your biohacking podcast bros are all up about, how it's sort of rewiring your brain and you're getting rusty because you don't know how to socialize anymore and all of that stuff. And that's why actually every kind of live event is getting that kind. So I'm not anxious at all. Actually, I'm very, very excited. But I do think that right now it's all very big and so exciting because there's a lot of first time that this is happening and first time that is happening.
We're going through another phase of everything for the first time ever, right?
Correct, which hasn't happened in a while. And it's also because it's never been this accessible to people. And I remember when Michael Jackson was in India, for example, you had to find 500 connections to get to a ticket. Exactly.
Today's 16, 17-year-olds have the ability to, and the voice and the interest and socially can actually make a plan like that and be a part of it. It was, that's also kind of coming of age. Tell me, Raveena, how do you navigate the balance between building this creative content but also the commercial success parameters that are required as a founder and CEO?
It is a chaotic balance to achieve, but I think that, like I said, again, if you have like clear direction, you realize that you can't do passion projects, and also, that's not why Dead Ant was built. It doesn't serve anyone to, be run as like something I'm just deeply in love with and emotional about, which of course every founder will begin their journey with. But very quickly you see that you have to let go of all of those, and that P word of pivoting comes in quite often, where you pivot and you pivot and you pivot and you pivot to whatever makes more sense. Events wasn't ever going to be, I didn't start out saying, oh, I can't wait to get into events, right? But very quickly, that has been like the most, and it's something that we have really enjoyed putting together and have gotten like, a real sense of how to make an experience that, is memorable. And also how to make sure that your tickets sell in a way that you are not broke after. So I think to keep fueling the dream, and to be able to have the luxury of doing the things that you love, you have to be realistic and practical about it, and also be doing a lot of the things that are, going to bring in new business, is going to be able to expand and be sustainable and be scalable, while being responsible and being ethical and all of those things. So like I said, it's a chaotic journey to achieve that balance, but one is trying every day.
Here, one thing that I will say, Raveena, by all accounts, I think talent has only the nicest things to say about Raveena and Dead Ant. So that's always a really good place to start, because, I think in the entertainment space, in the live entertainment space, it becomes so difficult to be able to prioritize everybody else's, needs and desires as well as your own. So I think that's a great shout out from a whole bunch of them. I've been to a bunch of the comedy shows and I've always heard only the nicest things about it. Tell me, comedy, like music, is built on gigs. And so networking, knowing the right people is crucial. You had your way of being able to get into a space. What advice do you have for youngsters, and particularly women, getting into this space? Because otherwise I think women tend to work very hard on the craft, but not as much on getting to know the people in the rooms making the decisions.
Yeah, I think that it has felt intimidating to a lot of people, and a lot of the confidence with which I'm able to walk into rooms has come from a career where I have chosen roles for myself where I've ended up being maybe the only or one of like two women in the team. So I've kind of always had to find ways to, remain confident, get my work out there and, build my relationships with people. But I think that a key thing that a lot of people get lost in is, letting go of biases. I mean, sure, people will warn you all the time about, how this person may be working, or, I had a bad experience with so-and-so. And, as long as it's about sort of course, as women, you're always listening to warnings and so on. And the whisper network is good for certain things, as we've seen in the past. But I do think that what has served me well has been to, work with everybody and see that it's not just about networking and building relationships on a perfunctory level, but it's more about understanding that each person comes with a different sort of value add to whatever you're trying to build, and everybody doesn't need to be turned into competition. They could be collaborators as well. You don't need to be I think it's to be a little bit more sure-footed about what you want to do, and to be able to, build relationships with all kinds of partners. Like, I'm agnostic to, it's not that I have this brand over that brand or this platform over that platform. I'm sort of working with everybody because there's a little bit, there's something different that everybody brings to the table, and it's all equally exciting, and it's all got equal potential for opportunity. And I think that to test those waters for yourself and see what may work for you, may not have worked for somebody else, and what may not have worked for you may have worked for somebody else. So I think those are things that you need to do, and I don't think you should be scared to take up space. I think a lot of people...
That's very true, and I think that's succinct. You really shouldn't be afraid to take up space. I think that's lovely.
Okay, especially in comedy, you see that a lot.
Right.
Like, even in green rooms and things like that. I think you see that a lot in comedy. It's a great example of it. Of course, it was true for music as well, when indie music was still finding its feet. But sorry, yeah.
No, absolutely. Since you talked a lot about your partners and working with them, shout out to the allies. Tell me about people who mentored you or just turned around and gave you, offered their hand to help you get your leg up.
I think there's been a lot of support from the community. I think that a lot of the comics have been like, okay, cool, I'm going to bet on this with you. And I think that's really, really important when you're, at a stage where you have to build something from scratch and explain to people why it's going to be important. And to have their buy-in just makes you more confident as you sort of move and grow. I think also through my career and, friends and family, there are a lot of people that have been super generous with their time and, sat me down. I've gone and spoken to other founders and CEOs of companies who've just been very, very generous with giving time and talking through, the business aspects of it. And with the artists, you've got Veer Das, who's been invested in it also because he's like, oh, this is my first student. What is she up to? And I blame him entirely for everything that I have gotten myself into now. Sorry?
It's your fault.
Yeah, it's your fault. So every time he says, oh, Raveena, are you sure? And I'm just like, you did this. So now you know what. So I have like a sort of informal board of advisors as well that has spent a lot of time coaching, mentoring, challenging, which is all are important aspects of it. And I think I'm very, very grateful for that support because it goes a very, very long way.
Okay, so, tell me, how long has it been since you started at Ant?
I started in 2019, so we're in year 6. Not that anyone's counting.
Right.
6 years and 73 days.
A hell of a lot. Tell me, do you allow yourself to manifest and visualize or plan and organize, or do you let a lot of the growth happen because you're reacting to it instinctively?
You don't have a minute to sit down and either, be self-indulgent about, oh, this went really badly and, feel bad, spend all this time being miserable about it. And nor do you have the time to, be slapping yourself on the back because the next thing has already started. So, there is an overall sort of structure and, North Star and milestones along the way that one has to hit. And I know that there is some sort of method that we have put into place that we follow. But most days, on the daily, it just feels like madness. And that we're somehow getting there. But I think it's also because everybody in the team as well is so ambitious about and sees the vision so clearly and believes also in sort of the potential that it has, that I think every day, every morning, there's like a new, like, impossible goal that we want to achieve. And I think that keeps it going, keeps it exciting. And I
mean, it's such a relatively new space that just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it's crazy.
Exactly. And in fact, if it was easy, then it would be worth doing, really. So for me, and so, doesn't mean it can't be done. And I'm out to prove that. Also, I tell myself every morning when I'm like, should I just update my CV? And I don't understand these founders who are like, oh, I'm on my 7th startup. Why would you do that to yourself? But then you also see how exciting and rewarding it can be. And each time it's like, oh, nobody's done it. Let me see.
No, I think, that's from everything that I've heard and spoken to so many young founders, and it's like hurtling through space at light speed. And, you don't have to be afraid to take up space because you're moving too fast to actually
You're moving too fast. You have no idea. Yeah, I think that half the things I'm saying, I'm just making them up because I'm just hurtling through. There's like laughter, tears. It's all very, I keep saying, I don't think our nervous systems are built to handle so many spikes in a single day, because in a single day, first of all, you're context switching all day long, from admin to editorial to live to client management to this, that, the other, and then you're sitting and doing audits and,
Okay, I have to ask you, a lot of the women that I talk to, whether they are on the talent side, talk about gatekeeping as a reality that they still deal with. Sometimes it's because they're not in the heads of the people making the decisions. Sometimes it's because they just aren't, and gatekeeping continues to be a thing. You're on the other side. How do you think women can be championed more in this space? How can we get more women breaking through, headlining, getting the specials?
I think Varna Garg, who is an Indian comedian who moved to America a long time ago and suddenly decided that she wanted to become a comedian in the middle of when her kids grew up and went to college. I think she's a great example of how to she came
back and to sold out shows.
But I mean, through the pandemic, she just went at it. I think consistency is one. The other is to just be bulldozed. To be very, to feel like I'm going to bulldoze over anything that stands in my way because I have this like dream that I want to achieve. And she's performing with Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. She's achieved in like 4 years what comedians are taking like 2 or 3 decades to do. And I think she's a great example of how you just put your head down, and I've known her for a while, and she's great in that she's constantly just talking to other women. She's championing them. So if you, by some stroke of luck or by the privilege that you are afforded in this lifetime, if you have the opportunity to actually champion other people who may not have that, I think that's very important. And she does that superbly. She's constantly getting other women to open shows for her. She's constantly introducing people who are in the business to each other to say, come on, let's do something. I'm here to support it. And, she's very much like, did you ask for enough money? Every time I've seen her talking to younger comedians and being like, well, did you ask for money? And they're like, no, we're just doing it for exposure. And then you get scolded by her, like mock scolds her children, but except this one is not mocking at all. And, she's very like, make the money, ask for more, and is constantly, of course, she has that personality type. Not everybody does. But she's constantly, talking about ways to do it, but she works non-stop. So it really depends on how you're wired, I think, in one sense. If you've got that grit and gumption and, oh God, the H word, which is hustle. There's so many like words that you don't want to say in these spaces, but if you've got like that determination and focus to just get there no matter what it takes, that's one way to do it. Nose down, don't listen to other people, don't, ask for too many opinions, fall down, get up, do it again, get there. And she's got a special out now. She's got a huge following on social media. She's come back to India and sold out. She's, I think that's one way to do it. And then, of course, if that's not like how you're wired, that's absolutely fine too. I just think that then you have to figure out a way in which you can, plan for it better. So it's not as chaotic, but maybe you want to be asking for mentorship and asking for help. And I think I understand it's difficult to do, because despite all my privileges, I still found it and the access that I have to a lot of people, I still find it very difficult to, for Dead End to have stepped out and asked people. There's also, you have to deal with your own ego and arrogance and, of what you've achieved so far to be like, oh God, now I have to do this again. But I think that if you let go of that and like stop coming in your own way and just give it a go, I think that's the other way to do it. And I think that you realize very quickly how when you ask, people are actually quite happy to help. Help you figure out things.
It is almost exclusively a group of people that will end up helping. Most people who ask for help get it. And so I think that's actually a great piece of advice to leave our funny young things with, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, talking to somebody, shortening the learning curve, taking the access that they are going to be able to offer you is something that doesn't come just from your personal relationships. It can come from a DM on an Instagram. I think that's actually a great point to have made.
Also, I think when you ask, it's very difficult for somebody to say no, they're not going to help. So that's like the cheat code. It's like, it's very difficult to look at somebody and say, no, I'm not going to help, because what sort of absolute person or absolutely garbage human being would ever be able to do that? I mean, that takes a special level. So, I mean, that's kind of what you realize along the way.
Tell me, in comedy, is imposter thing a very big issue? Is imposter syndrome?
Is it that in any in any sort of creative field? I think all creative professionals deal with imposter syndrome.
Not just creative. I think in all professions.
In all professions, perhaps, yeah. But I've seen that both egos and confidence, it's all very fragile. And you could have
comedy, right?
happen.
Don't you need so much bluster and confidence kind of to be able to do this day in and day out, and
absolutely. And you get instant feedback. You're not waiting for a review to come out later.
If you're bombed.
It's a silent room. It's why I refused to do it. When we were doing the workshop with Veer Das back in the day, when he explained that what he was actually trying to do at the time through the workshop was to whittle down, like there were some 20 something of us, and by the end of it there were like 6 left who completed it. Everybody else dropped along the way. We realized that he was actually looking for openers, so that he could perform in India. And he was like, we'll go to a bar and tell jokes. And it's like, I do that anyway. And he was like, but on a mic. And I was like, that sounds deranged. Why on earth would we, And then we started practicing, and I realized that, I don't have the nervous system to stand on stage and think I'm being funny and then have a really quiet room staring back at you. My God, I have so much respect for the people who are able to get up and do it every day. And I think the imposter syndrome, more than the men, it's a real thing with women who think they're not good enough. They're not good enough. They don't have the numbers. They're not able to sell tickets. They're not like Sumukhi Suresh. I think last year where she announced that, oh my God, I'm going to announce a show in 1,000-seater. And it was like a full, like, she went all guns blazing to be like, why, what do you mean women cannot sell out? Because it was always like the headliners. And after, like, we've been having conversations over the years about how these, lineups need to be more diverse and, men need to stop gatekeeping. And I think a lot of those suggestions have been implemented, but a lot of the cases, mostly you'll see that it's like, like a token sort of thing. Oh God, okay, I have 10 men on the lineup. Somebody's going to do choo-choo. So let me add 2 women. And it's a second thought, right? Right. Women headlining don't have the confidence. And I think Sumukhi is a great champion again, or she has an all-women. She started her own company also now called Motormouth, and she's got like works with women across different backgrounds on all kinds of formats and content and so on. And when she announced this, and there was so much sort of like noise around it, and I just sat back and thought, my God, the men in comedy are selling out rooms without a second thought. They announce much bigger rooms as well, like you have a 3,000-seater and stadium shows and so on. And we've got one woman who is saying, oh my God, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to sell out this 1,000-seater. And she did, and she continues to, and she's just been all over the place since, because she chose to. And last year was actually a wonderful year for Indian comedy because of all the people we called it at Dead Ant, we called it the year of audacity, because everybody had the audacity to sort of bet on themselves and not rely so much on, other people to get things done, to reduce the dependencies, to say, okay, I've got this, and do this themselves. And I think watching her sort of put this together has been great. And now she's selling out all over the place. So, yeah.
I think the Year of Audacity is a great title. And Raveena, please nominate 2 audacious women in entertainment for the long list for our 2025 cohort. Our jury will take the final call, but the same way that we are celebrating you, let's amplify others.
I would love to nominate, like I said, Sumukhi Suresh. I think she really put her money where her motor mouth is. So Sumukhi Suresh for championing and breaking through every barrier and saying, what do you mean it's not done before? I'll do it. Which sounds very familiar to me, as we've discussed, and I have great respect for that. I think also Aditi Mittal, she's been around, she's been one of the OGs of like when the Indian sort of comedy scene came together, and I think she has been through up the whole, she's been through the ringer with this. She's seen it in all, ways, shapes and forms. And she has stood her ground and gone from strength to strength and continues to speak her mind and be fearless. And I think both these women are women that would be inspirational for younger women, whether in comedy or actually just to see how they're lifing. So those would be my 2 nominations.
Thank you very much. The most interesting thing, Raveena, about you is that one never knows whether you're laughing with them, at them, or just mostly at your own cleverness. But
that's Raveena, actually the trick.
But Raveena, here's to making comedy blow up in India one chuckle at a time. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was lovely talking to you and learning from you. And congratulations, and we look forward to the many mountains you are yet to climb.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is Rodak from Hungama. Thank you for tuning in, and stay with us as we meet more women in entertainment who aren't just playing the game, they're changing it.
In conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music and gaming. Only on Hungama Game Changers podcast.